actually going to use the camera as a camera this time, because the quality will be better. Hello everybody, my name is Cameron Avesk Davis, and I am the music producer and owner of Hellas Hand Productions here on YouTube. This is the series I have started called How It's Produced, where I will be going through a bunch of songs that I have written before and telling you basically how I made them. Basically, I go through each individual instrument, the patterns I used, how those patterns tied together to create the full song. This time, we'll be checking out the song Terrified by my industrial music project, Even Death May Die.
I am terrified I may not make it through this life. I am sitting here staring at the wall in fear. We have gotta stay together, it won't go away. A year or more, we're all alone, we may not get back.
Alright, so if we look at this entire song, the song is made up of 17 patterns. It is an extremely simple song compared to so many other songs I have made, and that's interesting because this was one of my most popular songs on the album, but hey. So what I started this song on is this pattern, which is a pretty simple opening theme. And it's just 2 bars that repeats over and over again like that. I used a preset library that I use quite often called Flex, which is available with FL Studio, and I found a really cool sort of super saw-y type synth called Thrift Indicator here in Obeyed Compendium. And that's the noise that it makes. And then I just wrote the melody and stuck it onto my playlist. The other thing this part has is a crash cymbal, just a simple 707 crash cymbal. I also have reverse crashes throughout the song, which are exactly the same thing, just backwards. And at the beginning, we start with a nice punchy kick. The Flex instrument has on it a parametric EQ, my favorite equalizer in FL Studio, because it's a visual equalizer, and I like being able to see what the notes are. And it's set up so that it's bumping a little bit near the base of the actual sound that is being played and bumping the top a little bit. The way I do my basic EQing is I knock off all of the sound that doesn't need to be there, and in this case that's pretty much everything below 200 and maybe 300 hertz, and just knock all of that down and bump the exact bass part of it and the top part. For some reason, that works really well for making things come through nice and punchy. I also have a Maximus, which is just making it bigger. Maximus is like a maximizer, which is just a type of limiter that makes things louder. For the kick drum, I have my standard setup, which for me is a parametric EQ as well, bumping around 80 hertz and bumping up at the top as well so that we get that click noise too. And I have sausage fattener as always to make the kick nice and fat. The crash cymbal has only an EQ because you don't need crash cymbals to be boosted so much. Not always, depends on the song, and I didn't want to do that on this one. So the opening starts like this. It then goes into the next part of the song, which has a lead-in with a synth 1. Now this synth 1 is doing a super saw, which means it is a saw wave, which is a wave with a straight line on the left and a 45-degree angle line going down to the southeast. That saw wave is detuned like a motherfucker. The delay is up pretty high on a ping-pong delay, meaning it bounces back and forth across the stereo field. And it's got unison, which is making this patch play 4 different times all at once, detuning it slightly and spreading it out a bit so that it sounds like it's 4 different synths all playing through this at the same time. And the pitch is raised up 12 tones to raise it up 1 octave. And what I've got this synth doing is having a lead-in, which starts really low in velocity and goes up to the top so that it really feels driving as we drop into the next section of the song. That is happening at the same time as the reverse crash cymbal, which I mentioned before, and then we drop into pattern 9 and this whole 8 bars of music. This 8 bars of music includes a contact patch, which is using Heavyocity's Evolve Mutations 2. There is a instrument, a synth, that's called Bottoms Down Port that sounds like this. And Bottoms Down Port is really awesome for punchy bassline things. I've also got another Flex thing called an Arkson Cityscape 80s Theater. It's a pad. Said pad is just to fill up the stereo field. It's got some chords, obviously, that I've written here in the piano roll, and it's an 8-bar chord progression. I also have another synth one here, which is making a very good bass noise. All this bass is a square wave, which means it's a rectangle looking thing. It's got a sub bass that's a sine wave, which is the standard if you ever see an audio oscillator going up and down. It's got an effect on it, which is a distortion filter. So if I turn that on and off, the on version makes it, well, a little bit distorted and louder. And I've got a little bit of chorus to sort of fill out the stereo field a little more. Really on this, there's not much else going on in this synthesizer, but it's doing this. And making another bass line. I've also added some hi-hats. These hi-hats have a similar setup to most of my drums. So it's knocking out all of what doesn't need to be there, raising up a little bit at the high end, and boosting it with sausage fattener. So the drum line is doing this. So, dropping into the second section of the song, it sounds like this. The third section of the song is the first verse, which means it drops out everything except for that opening synth line and the pad. It also has one of these lead-in synth 1 lines with the super saw to make it come in nice and punchy. And it always, and I mean always, whenever you end 8 bars when you have drums, always add a single kick drum on the drop. Because here's the difference.
Trapped in my head.
So that's with the kick, and if we take it out,
Trapped in my head.
It feels somewhat incomplete without that kick there. So I always want that kick drum, just one hit right at the end at the first part of the next section, so that it leads in very nicely to the next section of the thing. I've got my vocals here, just one line of vocals for this song. I didn't double track or triple track until the chorus, and I've got a bunch of stuff on them. I've got an EQ, which is boosting 370, it looks like, in 4.920 because I'm singing in a really nasally voice in this one. I've got a compressor, which is allowing it to sit a little bit better on the top of the mix.
Trapped in my head, I am writhing in my bed.
Or it would be. It's really just making all the sound even. I've got a pitcher, which, as I've mentioned in the previous video, pitcher is FL Studio's or Image Line's auto-tune plugin. I have Sound Goodizer, which is a EQ and compressor all in one, and I've got 2 of them on, both doing A and Sound Goodizer. Sound Goodizer's A setting really makes everything brighter. And I've got EW Spaces. Spaces 2 is East West Studio Orchestra or Sounds Online's really excellent reverb plugin. And so the vocals and everything in this section sound like this.
Trapped in my head, I am writhing in my bed. Wrapped up in darkness, I did not expect this. I feel...
And it goes on until it drops into the chorus. Before the chorus drop, though, I have this. Contact has one of the things that is my favoriteest thingies ever, and it's called Rise and Hit. Rise and Hit allows for those really big, like, trailer-sounding rises with a huge orchestra and a bunch of synths, and it falls and crashes into a big boom. So this one is a 4-bar one, and it sounds like this. So, that whole build into the chorus sounds like this.
Feel my heart pounding, the chest pains are growing. Is it real or is it fake? My brain can't tell anyway. I am terrified, I may not make it through this life. I am sitting here.
For the chorus, I have it crash down in the cymbal. I also have here, you'll notice, that it is a drop. After this 8 bars, it builds up and drops for 4 beats to allow no sound except for this rise and hit to finish. And then it comes in with this synth 1 super saw to build into the chorus. And it's just a good way. That is what's known as a drop in electronic music. It has everything else is pretty much the same from before, from the second 8 bars. So it's got the bottoms down port. It has a kick drum with now a snare. The snare has the exact same sort of idea with... Instead of boosting around 80, it's boosting roughly around 120, in this case 167, and up top as well. And sausage fattener to make it nice and fat. So we've got an actual drum beat that makes it more EDM. We've got that bass line still going. We've got the pad. We've got the main theme. Still doing the same thing. And we have added this. These are Marcato strings using East West Studio Orchestra again. Marcato strings from Symphonic Orchestra Gold. One of my favorite things ever to use to make things sound more epic. As far as vocals go, I have triple tracked them, meaning I literally sang this 3 times and then sat them on top of one another. And all of these have a few things going on, but interestingly not so much as before. They have this going on, an EQ, boosting 526 to 745, and just really all around the top half of this is boosted. It has a compressor to make it all equal in sound, in volume, so that it can sit on top of the mix. It's got a sound goodizer, and in this time, I added a blood overdrive to make things nice and loud.
I am terrified I may not make it through this life.
One of them is, of course, a interesting, kind of okay harmony. But, as you heard a little bit of the chorus before, this is what the chorus sounds like.
I am terrified I may not make it through this life. I am sitting here staring at the wall in fear.
The next section adds some new interest to the initial opening synth line. If you notice, what's happening there is I have the same melody up top, but I've added some lower notes that are playing on sort of a more consistent rhythm, and it makes it sound all cool. I've also added this with a new flex preset called Forward March from Arcs and Cityscape. Really cool lead, and it's doing the actual synth melody that happens in this song. I also have some actual strings going on. I've got a 50-piece string section. Sus means sustain in this case, which means it keeps playing the same volume throughout. I have routed that to the second MIDI out track, which you don't really need to know, but the point is that it allows me to only have one of these instruments open and play multiple instruments. This is a MIDI out thing. I don't know what it's called. It handles MIDI, and it's taking channel 2, which is playing the strings. And these strings are playing a chord progression. And what's happening here is it's gearing up for the next verse. And when the next verse comes in, all that's happening is more of what was happening in the first verse, except this time we've got some drums going on.
Alone with myself, the thoughts, they are pounding, matching rhythm with my heart. Boom, boom, just a start. I reach out for cup.
These chorus vocals, because so much else is going on, including the strings and the melody and the drums and the bottoms down port bass thingy, I double track them to make them seem a little bigger for this part of the song. I then drop everything out and go back just to this pad in favor of this sort of softer vocal section. This softer vocal section, which sounds like this.
I keep on thinking I can find.
These vocals don't have anything different on them from the first verse, except that they are double tracked. And then I've got one of these builds again, another one of these drops. Notice here where it drops out and allows the super saw lead in to drop into the final chorus, or in this case, the final 2 choruses and the playoff. The final chorus has added this as well. Now, you may think of that as trombones, maybe? Nope. For some reason, French horns are the ones you want to make that Inception bois noise, and I love making the Inception bois noise, but it is sustain 6 French horns, sustained bright in East West Studio Orchestra Gold. I think it's excellent. Everything else is the same.
I am terrified I may not make it through this life. I am sitting here staring at the wall in fear.
The only thing that happens differently in this song is it adds the melody line from the synth to the second part of the chorus.
I am terrified I may not make it through this life.
You'll also notice that I've added a crash cymbal here. I've also added this rise and hit, that's pattern 12, to different sections of this, basically in between every big section of this song. You have to have some sort of transitional elements to make your songs sound good, and that's what I did here. Then I have the playoff, which is me singing, I am terrified, on double-tracked vocals down there. I should really organize this better, with the strings and everything, and it plays out like this. It then rises into a final play out, playing just that main melody that started the song off entirely. And that's about it. This is actually a really relatively simple song to write. The complicatedness was making sure the vocals all sounded good, and making it fun. All those transitions are really important for making your song sound really much more complicated than it is. It sounds way more professional if you really focus on those transitions, because a lot of people can write pretty decently catchy riffs, especially if they're given enough time, but really making your song sound professional is all down to the transitions and how you mix everything together. Really, this song only has a few different elements, but when you combine them together in a certain way, it creates a pretty fun, gothy industrial pop anthem. So, if you want to check that out, the link to the actual song will be in the description of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well to my YouTube channel. I'll be posting these a lot, and also a bunch of music that I write, and maybe other projects, but mainly it's focused on music nowadays. But anyway, ta-ta. Hope you enjoyed.